Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm the author of Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 2, Solo Standards for Piano, playing solo jazz piano. And you probably guessed, if I'm the author of Book 2, better believe I'm the author of Book 1 as well, and Book 3. Alright, enough of that. Today, I want to talk about something I love talking about, which is chorale style. What does that mean if we're going to make a chorale style piano arrangement? This could be jazz focused. It could not necessarily be jazz focused. You can make a chorale style arrangement of a classical piece, of a pop piece, of anything. So the basic idea of chorale style is that you're not really going to think pianistically. So let's write pianistic. What I mean is that we're not going to think about what can my two hands do, what beautiful voicings can I make, what kind of cool arpeggios can I arpeggiate. Instead, we're going to be thinking as though we're writing for four or potentially more single note instruments, or potentially less. But 4 is kind of our gold standard. And you could probably already imagine why. When we think about choirs, we think about soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Or if we think of string quartets, of course, they have 4 instruments. And we're going to use this kind of lingo when we're talking about how we're arranging in chorale styles. And we're going to divide these 4 voices between the hands. And in the right hand, we're going to have stems going up for the soprano, stems going down for the alto, up for the tenor in the left hand, down for the bass in the left hand. And so this is kind of a different way of thinking about creating a chord. It can be contrapuntal. I guess all music, let's just talk about that word for a second. So contrapuntal means that it's music built of stacking different melodies. And to some degree, any chord progression stacks different melodies, but some music might more obviously be made of different melodies than other kinds of music. Bach's music is highly contrapuntal because it's very clear that he's thinking in terms of multiple different melodies, each coming in with the theme of a fugue, for instance. Speaking of Bach, Bach wrote many chorales, and you can go to IMSLP and download this exact file. I know because that's where I got it from. But this is a great example, just to start to conceptualize of a chorale style arrangement. So you could see in the top we have the soprano line with stems going up. Then we have an alto line below that with stems going down. You can see that they have similar rhythms, but not exactly the same. And on the left hand, we have a tenor line with these stems going up, and a bass line with stems going down. And again, these have mostly the same rhythms. They're all organized around these quarter notes, but they're all moving at slightly different rates sometimes. Let me see if I can play this. I'm not that kind of a pianist. Okay, now, obviously if you're a jazz pianist, and probably most people watching this channel are interested in jazz, you're going to be using very different kinds of chords. But, I think it's just worth pausing and noting that he's able to create all these kind of in-between chords by having these inner movements. Right, we have this moment where it's not held out very long, but these things that aren't obviously chords in the Baroque, classical kind of milieu era are appearing because of this chorale kind of approach. Another composer who writes a lot in a chorale approach is Grieg. Let me see if I can find a good example. That's kind of a decent example. These are Grieg's lyric pieces. And by the way, I totally always recommend these pieces to people who are kind of ready to start playing classical music, but might not be ready for some of the more difficult pieces yet. Here's a great representation of a chorale style piece for the piano. It's called In My Native Country. There's so many sharps. Pardon me in advance if I mess up. These kinds of chorale pieces can really beautifully combine elements of the interesting vertical harmonies, with things that you could only get through the moving lines of each individual part. And I'll show you an example of a chorale style arrangement that I did. And this is from my book Solo Standards. And this is one of the different ways that I can kind of think of to play, especially a ballad. Right, it's pretty hard to do this on a up-tempo swing piece. It's going to be tricky to manage all those lines and to have all the different articulation. But for a ballad, maybe even for a bossa nova, this kind of thing is possible. So this is the piece Sweet Lorraine, probably most associated with Nat King Cole. And you can see, even just visually, that I'm starting with kind of a chorale style arrangement. How can you see this? Well, it's actually not that clear in the first few bars, but you start really seeing that the left hand, instead of just having, blocked chords, it's going a different direction. It's got these stemmed up notes, stemmed down notes, and they're moving at slightly different paces. And it's interesting to note, I think, and this is intentional, and I love kind of arranging like this, that at the very beginning, well, let's start from really the first two notes. The first two notes are absolutely alone here, right? The soprano voice, or we think it's soprano at least, comes in alone. And then for the next entrance is also alone. I guess this is probably the bass voice, I guess. And then here it happens very quickly that we get a third voice. So the entrance really proliferates. These voices proliferate from just 1 to 2 to 3. And then it remains at 3 voices for quite a while until it really proliferates here and we get some bigger chords. So I want you to listen for the way that these things grow in the first 8 bars. Here's where the fourth voice comes in. I missed that in my initial analysis. Okay. And so I think I created a nice effect here, but the way that I created it is by adding more and more voices from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 at that red circle. And then here where we have big chords, it's 5 voices. And why here? Well, one big reason is that the melody is ascending. And that's a nice opportunity to make the bass descend, right? We call this contrary motion. When one thing goes up, the other goes down. And you can just see in the music, everything in the right hand's kind of going up, everything in the left hand's kind of going down. And as we expand, there's more and more reason to fill in the middle. At least that's the theory here. Let's keep looking at this counterpoint and see what happens. so look at what happened here. This might be interesting, it might not. But this is the kind of thing you can do in a chorale style arrangement. So there's this kind of call and response between the melody and first the alto voice. Right? And then we do that again in the next phrase, but now the response is in the tenor voice. And so this is one way where I haven't gotten that creative when I'm arranging. I'm doing the same thing twice, more or less. But because one time it's in the alto voice, one time it's in the tenor, it really sounds hopefully a little bit different. Now, elements of the harmony are also changing, etc. But listen to the effect that creates. Let's keep going. Now I'll show you one last thing before I wrap this up. Right here, we have what's called a cross relation. And Bach does this, of course, so much more elegantly than I'm doing here, and the styles are very different. But this is a term borrowed from Baroque counterpoint. And the basic idea of the term is that you have two different versions of the same pitch class. When I say pitch class, I mean like an F and an F sharp, or an F and an F flat, a B and a B sharp, a B and a B flat. And so here we move very quickly from an F in the soprano to an F sharp, which ends up in the alto. And this is another kind of magical thing that you can do when you're thinking in this kind of chorale style, is that you can invent these cross relations. And this kind of allows you to form tension, color, those sorts of things within your harmonic language that you wouldn't necessarily normally be able to find. Finally, let me just contrast. I'll play that first A for you one more time, and then as this kind of chorale style, and then I want to play you in a more blocky style. I don't mean blocky in a negative way, but just as a contrast to chorale style, so you can hear the difference. So here's the written version in a chorale style. Versus, I love this too. And these styles, I can label something one or the other, but each of these styles is going to bring in some element of the other. So when I'm playing the blocky ballad style, which I often call the repeated quarter note style, I might play some counterpoint in the middle. I might have the tenor come in with some kind of counter melodies in order to accentuate something that I want to bring out. So it's not that you have to choose, but I wanted to show you that example of a chorale style so you can kind of conceive of another way of arranging for piano. If you're always just thinking, okay, F major, let me put in all my chord tones. C, let me put in all my chord tones. There is this other way of actually writing these horizontal lines. All right, folks, thank you for watching and indulging me. If you dig this way of thinking and want to learn more, I think you'd really enjoy some of these chapters in playing solo jazz piano. If you want to play that arrangement or study that arrangement, you can check out the book Solo Standards for Piano. I think the PDF's only like $11.99. Like, it is not expensive. So hop on over to jeremysiskind.com, pick yourself up something sweet. And if you have watched this far, say something about Grieg. I don't know what you might have to say about Grieg, but I want to hear it. Thanks, everybody.